Hey, the number 40 is important today. It's our 40th anniversary, and we're going to go ride 40 miles along the Moose Loop here in Anchorage, Alaska. While I was cycling today, and while we're kind of doing our little loop, I got pondering some thoughts. And not that we are the ones to give advice on life or marriage or that type of subject, but 40 years has taught us a little bit. And so as we were pondering and cycling and wandering, I was thinking about the first 10 years of marriage. And it's kind of an analogy of how this bike ride's kind of proceeding today. So the first 10 years, you get married. I was fresh out of Army jump school. Man, life is exciting. The possibilities are endless. It's kind of like that first part of a ride where, man, I feel great. Everything's smooth. The sky is the limit. And then, like today, shortly after we started, found out that, well, didn't get that battery in the one GoPro charged. But hey, just like that, when you first get married, you don't know all those things. And suddenly we pull out the other GoPro. And when we first got married, boy, we knew all the answers. I'm sure we did. I'm sure we told people that. But there's those little bumps that'll go along the way. But you're so enthusiastic, you're so excited that it's like no big deal, and onward you go. And right now, we find ourselves on a little bit of a wrong turn. Took a right when I should have taken a left. And you think about those first 10 years of marriage, and there's a lot of I should have taken a right, but we took a left, and oh well, we can fix that. Not a big deal. But the legs are fresh. We're fresh. Life's got all its adventures. And then time starts passing. And when I think about our first 10 years, yeah, we went from living where we grew up to moving a little bit further south, a couple thousand miles, followed by an eventual move where my dream came true. We're in Alaska, a long ways away from everybody. But you're still excited that possibilities are endless, kind of like that first 10 miles of a ride. So we're still on the Campbell Creek Trail. Once we get up to mile 10, and we start moving towards mile 20, maybe we'll come up with something to share about marriage year 10 through 20. We just crossed the 6 going on 7 mile zone, and interestingly, the path just kind of comes to a fairly abrupt end right into a street. And a change of direction is required because playing Frogger with cars on a 4-lane just isn't something we want to do. And so magically enough, 7 years into marriage, so we're at 1989 now for those keeping track, we were faced with a similar situation where all of a sudden one road ended and another one began. And so about that time in my past, a little bit earlier I guess, there's some warning. The military career, which didn't turn out to be a career, just a period of time, came to an end. And when you're a Russian linguist and the Soviet Union ceases to exist, suddenly your skills and service are no longer required. So we came to an abrupt change. Now, in retrospect, we can see that change was a good change, and it led to many other things. In our case, we stayed in Alaska, and I moved into that career that I swore I would never do, and I started training to be a teacher, a career that I would follow for the next 30 plus years. Well, the first decade is past. We're moving into the second decade. of our 40-year marriage. And it's similar to where we're cycling, because now, well, we've left the path. We've left the path that we knew. And moving into our second decade, boy, things were going smooth. We thought life was just kind of working out the way we thought. We're now to the point where both of our girls have been born. My teaching career was moving along. My first 2 years of teaching had passed. Wonderful situation. And then suddenly, on the last day of school of my second year, I get the notice. Hey, the path you thought you were on, nope, no longer. In fact, you don't have a job here next year, and you're welcome to go look and see what other teaching positions are open, but you won't be here. And suddenly my teaching career took a major turn of events. And kind of like the bike path we're on now, as we've left the Chester Creek Trail, not quite as smooth, definite bumps. You kind of want to go back to where you were, but wasn't an option. But we're still moving forward. We're still together. We have 2 wonderful daughters. Oh, we had bought a house right next to the school where, I was going to be forever, which didn't last. And so we began to negotiate kind of a different trail. Well, much like our marriage and career, we just hit mile 16 of our journey today, and we were reflecting on where we were at year 16 of our marriage. And it's just amazing how today's ride is kind of giving a mirror of things. So 16 years into marriage, and much like the trail we're on, where we just got a detour because the trail apparently had been undercut by the creek and it was falling into the river. So we were put on a detour. Well, 16 years into our marriage, we went on a massive detour as well. The situation I was in with work been going smooth, unlike these bumps we're on right now, and decided it was time to move to something different. And based on a promise that was made, I took a transfer, never with the intention of moving to the new school, but as a courtesy to my former principal to open up a slot at his school. Took the transfer to a middle school of all things. Never intended to teach there, never intended to stay there. The promise was reneged on, and all of a sudden I was in a place that I didn't want to be, much like that detour as you're going down a road through an industrial section. And that road would be there for the next 3 years. But kind of like this spiral road that we just went down on the bridge, you make the best of it. And you decide you're going to go forward and you're going to make this work. And it's kind of that same thing in marriage when you hit those unexpected things and you've decided you've just got to make it work. But now we're back on the path, and much kind of like it was that point in our marriage, we're back on the path. So suddenly you look down and you realize you're past the 20 mark. You're into the 20s. You've been married a long time now. Life seems to be going well. The kids are growing. They're prospering. They're making you pretty proud as parents. There's been some bumps along the way, of course. Much like the curves on this path at this time, you've learned after 20 years that some things you just have to kind of got to let go of the brakes, and you've just got to let it roll. And so this section of the trail is absolutely wonderful for that, because there's just a slight downhill. And if you just let the brakes go, the wheels just roll. Any wisdom back there, wife?
I am. Always there.
And then suddenly, you find yourself staring down 30 years, and you just wonder where it's gone. And then you're looking back and realizing somewhere between 20 and 30, your daughters have both graduated from high school. They're either going to or getting ready to graduate from college. 2 weddings are coming up before too much longer. You're realizing that career that sure seems slow getting going, sure had the bumps going along, but now you're attending retirement meetings, trying to figure out what is that next phase, how does that work? Because back in those early days, kind of like this bike ride, you're just getting going. And everything's running smooth, and there's a few bumps, of course. But now we're down that path, and now the legs are starting to say, hey, you've been riding a long time today. You know, they used to pop back pretty quick. Now it seems like it takes a little longer to recover. But somehow, you've stuck with it. You've simply kept going. You've simply taken those bumps in stride. The passing of time is inevitable. You can't stop it. And you embrace it. And just like we were doing a minute ago, man, we hit that downhill. We let the brakes off. And now you're kind of giggling because you're going so fast. Maybe not as fast as you were willing to go 20, 30 years ago. But it's still kind of fun to just let it rip sometimes. So, we've made it through the 10s, the 20s, the 30s, and we're coming up on the 40s. And we've got 4 different computers going, 2 on the bikes, our Apple Watches. Of course, nothing quite agrees, but you know, sometimes that's just the way biking is, and believe it or not, sometimes that's the way marriage is. You just don't always agree. But we can agree that something will say 40. Well, they all will, because I know us too well that we're not going to let anything not be 40. And that's okay. Because if one thing we've learned in 40 years that we could pass on to anybody, is there really is a difference between expectations and reality. 40 years ago, and a couple hours, because we got married at 6 o'clock in the evening, we had all sorts of expectations. You have that expectation of the reception and the expectation of the honeymoon. Yep, Lisa did spend a week in a tent canoeing. Not what her expectation was originally, I guarantee. But the reality is that's what we did, and that's what helped build some of those first memories.
Sleeping with the cows.
And we woke up one morning and somehow we had pitched the tent in a cow field. So we woke up with cows outside of our tent. Almost drooling in the tent, in fact. But when you look at what's it take for 40 years, well, it takes a lot of just plain laughter and life and love and hope. And the truth is, there's disappointment, there's ups, there's downs. But just like a bike, you just got to keep pedaling. You just got to realize that each pedal kind of makes that time go by. So thanks for coming along on our little reminiscent journey on our 40th anniversary, where originally we had been in Europe cycling, but then reality came along, and I think we're still going to be okay. But thanks for coming along. We've had a great day. I hope you have too. And we're going to leave you with one last word of wisdom from the Lighty. Here's the pedal pushing wife for the first time ever.
Oh no. Find things you like to do together.
And that's a wrap. Find things you like to do together. I chose cycling for her.
Yes, you did.